You think the worst moment is catching your husband hugging another woman? But what if the hug wasn't passion, but desperation? What if his smile vanished not from guilt, but from fear? I came home early and found a secret, but it wasn't the secret I thought. And the real betrayal was far filthier than just an affair. My name is Eliza. I am 38 years old, and my world is built on verifiable data. As a senior auditor at Veritas Solutions, I don't just look at numbers, I look for the story they tell, the patterns they hide, the truths they try to obscure. My job is to find the single crucial discrepancy in a mountain of acceptable data. It is a skill. I've learned that you cannot simply turn off when you leave the office. The dry, 90-degree heat of Scottsdale was a familiar slap when I stepped out of the Uber, a full 6 hours earlier than I'd planned. My flight from LAX had been abruptly canceled due to a mechanical issue, scrubbing the last day of my client review. The house was quiet as I keyed in the code. Julian, my husband, wasn't expecting me until well after dinner. I dropped my leather carry-on by the door, the silence of the house feeling cool and pleasant. I kicked off my heels, the travertine tile cold against the soles of my feet. All I wanted was a glass of iced tea and an hour by the pool before I had to be a person again. I headed through the living room toward the wall of glass that opened onto our backyard. And that is when I saw them. They were standing by the new stone fire pit, shielded from the neighbors by a dense wall of ficus. My husband, Julian, and Sloane. Sloane, the impossibly chic, perpetually anxious wife of Marcus, Julian's business partner. Julian was holding her. He was turned mostly away from me, and he was smiling, a bright, broad smile that I realized, with a sudden cold pang, I had not seen in months. I didn't mean to be quiet. The slide of the heavy glass door on its track was just a whisper of sound, but it was enough. Julian's head snapped in my direction. The smile didn't just fade. It evaporated. It was as if a mask had been ripped from his face, and what was left beneath was raw and pale. The blood drained from his features so fast he looked gray. He was 40, an energetic man who built beautiful things with his hands, but in that instant, he looked brittle and ancient. My auditor's brain, the part of me that never sleeps, began to log the details. Julian's hands were on her upper arms, gripping her. Her body was rigid, not soft. This was not the embrace of lovers. This was something else. It was tension. It was desperation. Sloane, when she finally turned, didn't look guilty. She didn't look like a woman caught. She looked like a driver spotting a semi-truck just before impact. She looked terrified. As Julian released her, pushing her away almost violently in his haste, her hand jerked. Something small, black, and rectangular slipped from her grasp and clattered onto the limestone patio. My eyes locked onto it. Not a phone. It was a portable hard drive. Sloane lunged for it, scooping it up, her movements frantic. She clutched it to her chest as if it were a vital organ. Julian found his voice first, but it wasn't his. It was a high, thin version of it. "Eliza, my God, you're home. Your flight. I thought." "Canceled," I said. My own voice was calm. I was watching his hands. They were shaking. "Sloane," he stammered, gesturing wildly between us. Sloane was just... She was dropping by, with the design documents. The design documents. For Riftwood Artisans, their bespoke furniture company. I looked at Sloane, who was trembling so hard I thought she might vibrate apart. I looked at the hard drive she was hiding against her expensive silk blouse. The discrepancy. In an age of secure cloud servers, of shared drives, of instant encrypted transfers, which I knew for a fact Riftwood used, Sloane was physically delivering design documents on a portable drive. Why was she trembling? Why did Julian look like he had just witnessed a murder? They were waiting for the explosion, for the tears, the accusations, the melodrama. They were braced for the scene of the wronged wife. I gave them none of it. I let a small, cool smile touch my lips. It was the smile I used in boardrooms just before I revealed an 8-figure accounting error. It didn't reach my eyes. "It's fine," I said, my voice perfectly level. I held Julian's panicked, guilty gaze. "I'm just going to get some water." I turned, my back straight, and walked slowly into the kitchen, leaving the two of them frozen in the heat. The real betrayal wasn't the hug. The real betrayal was the lie. And I knew, as surely as I knew my own name, that hard drive was the key. I did not get water. I walked to the espresso machine, the one Julian had bought me for my 35th birthday, and pulled a double shot. My hand, as I held the small ceramic cup, was perfectly, unnervingly steady. I am an auditor. Panic is a variable I do not permit. I leaned against the cool marble of the island, listening to the muffled, frantic murmuring from the patio. They were gone within 2 minutes. I heard the scrape of the side gate, the click of the latch. He didn't come inside. I heard his car start, the tires spitting gravel as he pulled too quickly out of our driveway. Good. I needed to analyze the assets. One Julian's stress. For the last, say, 6 months, he had been a walking nerve ending. He blamed it on Riftwood. "Supply chain issues," he'd snap, pacing the living room. "The cost of imported teak is astronomical. Eliza, you wouldn't believe the logistics." I did believe him. It sounded plausible. 2. The passwords. 3 weeks ago, a complete digital lockdown. Our shared cloud, our bank accounts, even the home network. "Just enhancing security, honey," he'd said, not looking up from his laptop. "Marcus got hacked. We're tightening the ship." It was a reasonable explanation. From a business perspective, it was prudent. But he hadn't shared the new passwords. He'd just handled it. 3. The hug, the tension in his arms, the rigid terror in Sloane's body. 4. The hard drive, a physical object in a digital world, a liability. You use a hard drive when you don't want a record of a transfer. You use it to move something you cannot risk sending through the air. I drank the espresso in one swallow, the bitterness grounding me. The picture forming was not one of infidelity. Infidelity is messy, emotional, human. This was cold, structured, and deliberate. This was procedural. That night, Julian came home late. He was apologetic, his energy manic, his eyes hollow. He'd bought me flowers, a gas station bouquet of carnations that smelled like plastic. He blamed Sloane, said she was having a breakdown over Marcus, that he was just playing therapist. It was a terrible, flimsy lie, and the fact that he thought I would believe it was the real insult. I played the part. I was quiet, tired from my trip, and went to bed early. I lay on my side of our king-sized bed, my breathing deep and even, and faked sleep for 2 hours. At 2:03 in the morning, Julian slipped out of bed. I waited. I heard the faint click of his office door down the hall. I gave him 10 minutes before I reached for my own laptop. He wasn't texting Sloane. I already knew he wouldn't be. Weeks ago, my simmering, unnamed suspicion had prompted me to do something unethical but necessary. I had installed a keylogger on the shared family computer in his office, the one he increasingly preferred to his own laptop. I had told myself it was for work, a way to test security protocols, a lie I didn't even try to believe. I just needed to know. I opened the remote access port. I watched his screen in real time. There were no love letters, no illicit chat windows, no secret Facebook profiles. He was in a browser, his fingers flying across the keys in a way that was almost animalistic. He was opening and closing windows, his cursor darting. He was clearing caches, running disk utilities, searching. I pulled up the log of his search queries from the past 48 hours. My blood did not run cold. It felt, instead, like it was turning to ice, solidifying in my veins. The searches were not for romantic getaways or gifts for mistress. The searches were how to secure data wipe external drive, Swiss extradition laws, United States, untraceable crypto transfers, Delaware Shell Corporation anonymous owner, sentencing guidelines, wire fraud. I sat in the dark of our bedroom, the blue light of my laptop screen illuminating my face. The puzzle pieces clicked into place with the sickening finality of a coffin lid shutting. The stress, the passwords, the panicked, desperate hug, the hard drive. Julian wasn't having an affair. My husband was a criminal, and he was getting ready to run. The next morning, I was up before the sun. I showered, dressed for a day I wasn't going to have, and put on a full face of makeup, armor. When I came downstairs, Julian was already in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was still wearing yesterday's pants. He was clearly rehearsing a speech, a new set of lies to patch the holes in the old ones. He looked up as I entered, his face a mask of practiced contrition. "Eliza, honey, about yesterday." I didn't let him begin. I walked to the coffee machine, poured myself a cup, and sat down at the quartz island directly across from him. I did not add cream or sugar. I just held the warm mug, my hands steady. I met his gaze. It was the gaze I used on a junior associate who thought they could bury a rounding error. "I want a divorce," I said. The words hung in the sterile, silent kitchen. The effect was immediate. Julian's jaw went slack. This was not in his script. He was prepared for tears, for screaming, for accusations about Sloan. He was not prepared for a summary judgment. "What?" he stammered. "Eliza, just wait. You're upset. I get it. What you saw yesterday." "I'm not upset, Julian," I said, my voice as flat as a spreadsheet. "I am decided." He stared at me, his mind clearly racing, trying to recalculate. He was trying to find the angle, the emotional leverage. And then something extraordinary happened. I watched it pass over his face, as clear as a line item. He was relieved. It wasn't a subtle shift. It was a visible, physical release of tension. The tightness in his shoulders disappeared. The panic in his eyes was replaced by a cold, transactional focus. He had been dreading a fight he didn't know how to win, and I had just handed him a different, much easier, negotiation. He nodded, leaning forward, all pretense of the loving husband gone. He was a businessman now. "You're right," he said, the speed of his agreement startling me. "You're absolutely right. We've been distant for a long time," he agreed too fast. "I don't want this to be ugly. Eliza," he continued, gaining momentum. You deserve everything. The house is yours. Of course. I'll move out today. And for a settlement. What about $2 million? Is that fair? We can have the papers drawn up by end of day." I just looked at him. $2 million. He said it like he was offering me 200. It was a sum of money meant to shock, to overwhelm, to end the conversation. It was go away money. "I want you to be taken care of," he said, the lie tasting like acid in the air between us. "That's very generous," I said, my voice quiet. "It's what you deserve," he said, reaching for his briefcase. He pulled out a single, neatly folded document. He'd had this prepared, not the divorce papers, but this. "There's just one thing. A formality, really. For the sake of the company. It's a standard non-disclosure agreement." He slid it across the island. I didn't touch it. "An NDA. Just to protect Riftwood artisans," he said, his smile almost charming. "It just states that you agree not to discuss any proprietary information, financials, client lists, anything related to the business. Marcus and we're in a delicate phase of expansion. We can't have any distractions." And there it was, the real price. He wasn't trying to save his marriage. He wasn't trying to apologize for an affair. He was trying to buy my silence. He didn't see a wife. He saw a threat. He saw a senior auditor at Veritas Solutions who had, for 12 years, had a front row seat to his life. He wasn't paying me off for his infidelity. He was paying me off for my competence. He thought I was the heartbroken wife. He thought the $2 million in the house were compensation for Sloan. He had no idea that I knew the hard drive was the real sin. He had no idea that I knew about the shell corporations, the Swiss accounts, the impending flight. I had to use that. His assumption was my only cover. I let my lip tremble. I looked down, forcing a tear to well in my eye. I let my steady hand shake. Just a little. I can't believe it, I whispered, playing the part he had cast for me. All this time. Was it her? Was it Sloan? He looked away, a perfect performance of a guilty man. Eliza, it was a mistake. It meant nothing. I need to think, I said, pushing the NDA back toward him. This is too much. 2 million. An NDA. It feels so cold. Like you're just erasing me. I watched him recalibrate. He needed my signature on that paper more than he needed air. My performance of emotional devastation was his new leverage. Of course, he said, his voice softening, all fake sympathy. Take your time. Take the day. Think about the offer. It's the best way. Eliza. For both of us. A clean break. I stood up, leaving my full cup of coffee on the counter. I'll be in the guest room, I said. I'll think about it. I walked away, my back straight, not letting him see the look on my face. He wasn't trying to end a marriage. He was trying to muzzle the key witness, and he had just told me exactly how much my silence was worth. I locked the guest room door. My hands were not shaking, but a cold, refined rage was singing in my veins. It was the feeling I got just before I broke a case, the hum of adrenaline that came from spotting the fatal flaw in a set of books that were meant to be perfect. Julian had made a critical error. He had mistaken my love for stupidity. I pulled out my personal cell, the one he didn't know I kept, and dialed the first number on my in case of emergency list. The phone rang twice. Griffin, a sharp voice answered. Griffin was the most ruthless divorce attorney in Phoenix, a man who specialized in complex financial separations, which was a polite way of saying he eviscerated wealthy spouses who tried to hide their assets. Griffin, it's Eliza. I'm initiating a full client engagement, effective immediately. There was a pause. Griffin had been a casual acquaintance for years, a contact from a charity board. Eliza, that's a strong opening. What's happened? My husband just offered me $2 million and the house to sign an NDA, I said, my voice as flat and clinical as if I were reading a P&L statement. Another pause, this one shorter. I heard the scritch of a pen. An NDA covering what? His business, Riftwood Artisans, all financials, all operations. He wants me to sign it by end of day. He thinks I'm devastated because he's having an affair. Is he irrelevant? But yes, he's letting me believe it. Eliza, Griffin said, his voice dropping. All business now. Listen to me very carefully. You do not sign anything. You do not agree to anything. You do not even look at that document. $2 million is not, I'm sorry I slept with my partner's wife money. That is, I am about to be indicted money. That's money people pay to hide a crime, not a mistress. I know, I said. He's been searching for Swiss extradition laws and Delaware shell corporations. The line went silent for a beat. My God, Eliza, you're not a wife in this equation anymore. You're a witness. I need to stall him, I said. He needs to believe I'm on the verge of signing. He needs to think I'm just a heartbroken woman negotiating for a better emotional payout. I can do that, Griffin said. I'll draw up a counter-proposal. We'll argue over non-compete clauses. We'll demand a morality clause. We'll nitpick the confidentiality terms. I will bury him in so much red tape he'll think you're just being difficult. How much time do you need? I don't know, I said, but I'm about to find out. I hung up and made a second call. This one was to a number I'd kept from my early days at Veritas. It was to a woman named Ava. Ava was a forensic accountant, a legend. She'd spent 15 years at the FBI tracking the money of cartels and terrorists before going private. She was expensive, and she was worth every penny. "This is Ava." "Ava, it's Eliza. I have a problem." "A professional problem or a personal problem?" Ava asked, her voice perpetually sounding bored. "It has just become a professional problem," I said. I transferred the $200,000 I kept in a private, ring-fenced account, my Fuck You fund, to Ava's retainer account as we spoke. "You've got my attention," Ava said, no doubt seeing the wire transfer hit. "My husband's company, Riftwood Artisans. He thinks he's having an affair. I think he's running a criminal enterprise. I don't care about the affair. I want you to follow the money. I want to know where every single cent is coming from and where it is going." I paused, walking to the window, looking out over the perfectly manicured desert landscaping that was paid for by a lie. "He thinks I'm just a stupid, betrayed wife," I said, my voice dropping. "He forgot what I do for a living. Find what he's hiding. Ava, find it all." "I'm in," Ava said. "I'll need access." "You have it. I'll get you the new passwords." He locked me out, but he was sloppy. He used the family computer. I ended the call and took a deep breath. I splashed cold water on my face, practiced a look of red-eyed devastation in the mirror, and then unlocked the door. I went downstairs. Julian was pacing in the living room, his phone in his hand. "Julian," I said, my voice cracking perfectly. He spun around, his face a mess of fake concern. "I called my lawyer." I wept. "Griffin, he says I shouldn't sign the NDA. He says it's not fair. He wants to talk to your lawyer." I watched the flash of rage in Julian's eyes, quickly masked by a sigh of frustration. He thought I was being manipulated by an aggressive lawyer. He was furious, but he was also relieved. It was a normal, predictable complication. A greedy lawyer. "Eliza, baby, he's just trying to get more money." "I know," I sniffled, "but I need him to look at it. Please, just to be safe. I'm so confused." "Fine," he snapped, then softened his voice. "Fine, whatever he wants. Just tell him to be quick." I nodded, looking like a lost, broken child. He had no idea. The board was set, the pieces were in motion, and the auditor was now in control. Ava didn't need a week. She needed about 48 hours. The information came to me not in a single phone call, but in a series of encrypted emails, the kind that self-destructed 30 seconds after reading. Ava didn't deal in emotion, she dealt in data. And the data she found was staggering. Her first report was concise, brutal, and elegant. Riftwood Artisans is a laundry. It wasn't a metaphor. Julian's bespoke furniture company was a high-capacity washing machine for dirty money. The international clients he was always complaining about, the ones whose demands were so difficult, they were ghosts. P.O. boxes in Panama, anonymous entities in the Marshall Islands, shell companies registered to addresses that didn't exist. The mechanism was classic, almost textbook. Riftwood Artisans would bill one of these shell companies for, say, $700,000 for a custom teak installation in a Dubai penthouse. The materials and labor, Ava calculated, were worth maybe $30,000. The client would pay the full, grossly inflated invoice. The payment would arrive, dirty, from an untraceable account, and land in Riftwood's legitimate business account. It was then clean. All those months Julian had spent pacing the house, his face gray with stress, complaining about supply chain issues and thin margins. It was a performance, a brilliant, calculated lie. He wasn't failing, he was thriving. Riftwood Artisans wasn't struggling. It was a geyser of illicit cash. They were moving millions of dollars a month, and Sloan was right in the middle of it. Ava's background check confirmed what Julian had never mentioned. Sloan wasn't just Marcus's perpetually nervous wife. She was Riftwood's chief financial officer. She was the one processing the invoices. She was the one managing the books. She was the co-conspirator. That moment by the fire pit, the desperate, tense hug snapped into crystal clear focus. It wasn't passion. It wasn't guilt. It was a business dispute. I had walked in on the CFO confronting her partner about a discrepancy. The hard drive she'd dropped wasn't design documents. It was their real ledger. The second set of books. They were arguing over the split. I felt a cold, clean satisfaction. I had them. Julian, Marcus, Sloane. They were all tied together in a neat, indictable bundle. But Ava wasn't finished. 2 days later, a second email arrived. Found an anomaly. It read, "The primary offshore account is in Zurich, as expected. Signatories Julian Price, Marcus Donovan, Sloane Donovan. This is the main collection account for the laundered funds, but there are microtransfers. Small, seemingly random amounts, 20,000 here. 45,000 there being siphoned out of the main Zurich account weekly. They're disguised as vendor payments or consulting fees. They are not. Ava had followed those payments. They weren't going to vendors. They were being routed through 3 more shadow companies, a complex web designed to be untraceable, before finally landing in a single, separate, highly private account. An account in the Cayman Islands. An account that was not shared. An account that Marcus, his business partner, did not know about. An account that Sloane, his CFO and supposed mistress, had no access to. Julian was skimming. My husband, the man I had worried about, the man I'd tried to support through his business stress, was not only a money launderer, he was an embezzler. He wasn't just lying to me. He was actively stealing from his partners in crime. He was building a second nest egg, a secret fund within the secret fund. He was double-crossing the very people he was committing felonies with. He was using Sloane as a cover, letting me believe she was the betrayal, while he was secretly betraying her, too. He was planning to run, and he was planning to leave them all to hold the bag. Ava was a bulldog. She didn't let go. An anonymous Cayman account was a challenge, not a dead end. It took her another 3 days. Days I spent in a haze of feigned grief and meticulous legal stalling with Griffin. I was a wreck, just not the kind of wreck Julian thought I was. Then, the final email came. It was just 2 lines. The Cayman account is not in his name. It's in the name of a Lara Donovan. I stared at the screen. Lara Donovan. The name meant nothing to me. I searched my memory. Every company picnic, every holiday party, every client list I'd ever glanced at. Nothing. I called Ava immediately, breaking our encrypted protocol. "Who is Lara Donovan?" I asked, my voice flat. "Is she an employee? A new partner?" I was running the background as the email sent. Ava's voice was grim. "This is the piece you've been missing. This is the real story." I waited, the silence in the guest room feeling heavy. "Lara Donovan," Ava said, "is Marcus's sister, his 28-year-old half-sister, to be precise, lives in New York, works in art gallery management, which appears to be a front for living off a trust fund. She flew to Scottsdale 3 times in the last 6 months, never stayed at a hotel, always took an Uber from the airport to a private rental in Paradise Valley. The blood didn't just drain from my face. It felt like my entire circulatory system had stalled. It wasn't Sloane. It was never Sloane. The entire affair, the one Julian was letting me believe, the one he was using as leverage to get me to sign the NDA, was a phantom. It was a decoy, a masterfully crafted piece of misdirection. Julian wasn't sleeping with his partner's wife. He was sleeping with his partner's sister. Every single piece clicked into place, and the resulting image was so much uglier, so much more diseased than I could have ever imagined. Sloane wasn't the mistress. Sloane was the tool. She was the CFO, the woman with access, the one who could move the money. Julian had likely seduced her, or at least convinced her he was on her side. a partner against her oafish husband Marcus. He'd made her believe they were in it together, a secret alliance, while he was using her to help him launder the money. And all the while, he was secretly, methodically, stealing from their shared pot of dirty money. He was siphoning it away, bit by bit, into a private account controlled by his real mistress, Lara Donovan. He was building an escape fund, a life raft for two, and he was forcing Sloane to help him build it against her own and her husband's best interests. The hug by the fire pit. It was so clear to me now I felt like I was standing there again. That was not a romantic dispute. That was Sloane, the CFO, confronting Julian. She had seen the discrepancies. She knew money was missing, money that was supposed to be theirs, her and Marcus's and Julian's. She was accusing him, her voice probably trembling with rage and fear. "Where is our money? Julian?" She must have suspected he was stealing from the partnership. What she never could have guessed was that he was stealing it for her own sister-in-law. He was a monster, a sociopath in a bespoke suit. He was playing four-dimensional chess, using my broken heart as a shield, using Sloane's greed and her position as a weapon, and using Marcus's trust as a piggy bank, all so he could ride off into the sunset with a 28-year-old from New York. He wasn't just lying to me. He was lying to everyone. He had built a house of cards on a foundation of betrayal, and he had made every single person in his life a pawn in a game only he knew he was playing. I finally understood. The $2 million offer wasn't just to buy my silence as a wife, it was to buy my silence as an auditor. But the affair was the cover story he was using to explain the money, and he had one for me, and a completely different one for his partners. The level of his depravity was, in its own way, impressive. He had miscalculated on only one point. Me. I let Griffin drag out the negotiations for 3 more days, a blizzard of red lines and emails about unacceptable indemnity clauses and vague definitions of proprietary data. It was a beautiful performance, a legal ballet designed to make me look difficult and greedy, the exact profile of a scorned wife. Finally, when Julian was at his breaking point, I had Griffin concede on everything. I was emotionally exhausted. I just wanted it to be over. I agreed to meet Julian at Mastro's, a steakhouse downtown with obscenely expensive food and booths so dark they were practically confessional. It was the perfect choice. He wanted this to feel like a civilized, albeit tragic, conclusion. He wanted to feel generous and magnanimous as he stuck the knife in. I spent an hour getting ready. My goal was not to look beautiful, but to look correct. I wore a beige silk dress, expensive but muted. I wore my hair down, letting it look slightly undone. My makeup was flawless, applied with a surgeon's precision, but I had cultivated a faint, convincing redness around my eyes. I was the very picture of dignified grief. I was the wife he could feel good about betraying. He was already there, sitting in a deep leather booth, a glass of $9 an ounce scotch in his hand. Beside him sat a sleek, black leather portfolio, the 30 pieces of silver. He stood when I approached, his face a mask of somber concern. "Eliza," he said, his voice low and practiced. "Thank you for coming. I know this is hard." "It is," I whispered, sliding into the booth. I kept my gaze down, as if I couldn't bear to look at him. We ordered. He ordered a filet for me, remembering it was my favorite. A small, cruel performance of his lingering care. I ordered a seltzer water. I needed a clear head. "I'm glad we can do this," he said, leaning forward, his eyes shining with an eagerness he was trying to hide. He was so close to the finish line. His escape fund was full. His new life with Lara was waiting. He just had to muzzle the auditor. I let a single perfect tear slide down my cheek. I'd rehearsed it. "I just have one question. Julian," I said, my voice small. "Before I sign this, after 12 years, I feel like I deserve to know the real truth." He tensed. I could see the calculation behind his eyes. He was weighing the cost of the lie. Anything, Eliza. You know that. I finally looked up, letting him see the full force of my manufactured pain. It was Sloane. Wasn't it all this time? All those late nights at the workshop, the supply chain trips. It was her. This was his moment. This was the lie he needed me to believe. Confessing to the Phantom affair was the easiest, cleanest way out. It gave me a tangible, emotional reason for our divorce, a reason that had nothing to do with wire fraud or Swiss banks. It made my $2 million payout look like hush money for a simple, tawdry affair. It was the perfect, brilliant decoy. He sighed, a deep, theatrical sound. He reached across the table, trying to take my hand. I flinched, pulling it away. It was an authentic, visceral reaction, though not for the reason he thought. Yes, he said, his voice heavy with a regret he had probably practiced in the mirror. It was a brief, terrible mistake. Eliza, I am so sorry. You lied to me, I whispered. I was a coward, he said, leaning back. And then, the final sociopathic twist of the knife. He blamed her. She's not happy with Marcus. You know that. She was persistent. I was weak. I should have stopped it. I promise you, it meant nothing. It was just an escape. An escape. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. He pushed the leather portfolio gently across the table. It slid onto my placemat. That's why this is so important, he said, his voice turning smoother, the salesman closing the deal. It was a terrible mistake, but now we can end this cleanly. You're taken care of. The business is protected from any ugliness, and we can both move on. I stared at the portfolio. He was offering me $2 million, a fraction of what he had stolen, to look the other way. And he didn't even have the decency to be betraying me for the woman he was actually betraying me for. He was a nesting doll of deceit. I looked up at him. This man I had spent a decade of my life with. The coldness I felt was absolute. It was a pure, clean anger that burned away every last trace of the woman who had loved him. I put my hand on the portfolio. His shoulders relaxed. He had won. I'm so shocked, I said, and my voice did tremble, though not with grief. I thought I was ready, but hearing you say it, hearing you admit it, it's all so real now. I stood up, grabbing my purse. Eliza, he said, alarm flashing in his eyes. He was afraid I was going to make a scene. I can't, I whispered, shaking my head. I'm sorry. I need one more night. I need to absorb this. The lies. I will sign it. I promise. I'll sign it tomorrow. I'm just too shocked right now. I didn't wait for his answer. I turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving him there with his expensive steak and his 9-ounce lie. I left him sitting in the dark, absolutely, utterly convinced that he had won. He thought I was a broken woman going home to cry. He had no idea I was a predator going home to sharpen my claws. I didn't go home. I went to Griffin's office. It was 9 o'clock at night, and the lights in his downtown Phoenix high-rise were the only ones on in the entire building. Ava was already on the secure conference line, a disembodied, clear voice in the sterile room. He's all in, I said, skipping the pleasantries. He confessed to the affair with Sloane. He thinks I'm at home, shattered, and will be signing the NDA tomorrow to get my $2 million buyout. He's a fool, Ava's voice crackled. He's insulated himself with a lie, and he thinks it's fireproof. Griffin, who had been reviewing the final data packet Ava had sent, steepled his fingers. The data is complete, he said, which for Griffin was high praise. The wire transfers, the encrypted ledgers, the Cayman account, the link to Lara Donovan. We have a clean, undeniable case for wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. I can have this in front of the U.S. Attorney's office by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. They'll be arrested by noon. Julian, Marcus, and Sloane. He looked at me, expecting relief. I felt nothing. No, I said. Griffin raised an eyebrow. No, Eliza, this is the win. This is a multi-count federal indictment. They will go to prison for a very long time. That's a quiet win, I said, standing up and walking to the window, looking down at the lights of the city. They get arrested, they post bail, their lawyers bury the case in motions for 2 years. It all happens in a courtroom, in whispers, in documents nobody ever sees. The world sees business dispute. And Laura Donovan, she just disappears with the Cayman account. No. I turned back to him. I want a public reckoning. I want their names, their reputations, and the facade of their artisan company turned to ash. I want them to be ruined before the federal agents even put the cuffs on. I don't just want justice. Griffin. I want to see the look on their faces when they realize they lost. All of them. Griffin stared at me. Eliza, this is a divorce proceeding, not a Shakespearean revenge tragedy. He made it a tragedy, I said. I'm just writing the 5th act. Ava's voice cut in, suddenly animated. Then I might have the stage for you. I was looking into their forward-facing calendar, trying to see if I could predict his flight risk. They're not running. Not yet. They're planning their biggest event of the year. She pulled up a file on the conference screen. It was a slick, professionally designed invitation. The 3rd Annual Riftwood Artisans Charity Gala and Showcase. I read aloud. At the Montelucia, in 1 week. It's their big We Are Legitimate event, Ava explained. They woo new, high-net-worth investors. They present themselves as philanthropists and artists. They get a new crop of wealthy clients, who will then, no doubt, become the next round of international buyers to help them launder more money. They're not just throwing a party, they're recruiting. The room was silent. A 5-star resort, a ballroom full of Scottsdale's wealthiest and most influential, a stage, a microphone. It's perfect, I whispered. Oh, it gets better, Ava said, and I could hear the rare smile in her voice. I was curious about our New York art gallery manager, so I ran a check on incoming flights. Guess who just booked a first-class one-way ticket from JFK to Scottsdale, arriving the day of the gala? A cold, sharp thrill ran down my spine. Laura Donovan. Laura Donovan, Ava confirmed. She's not coming to hide. She's coming to claim her prize. She's coming to stand in that ballroom, watch her lover and her brother on stage, and celebrate the new life he's stolen for her. She's coming for the debut. I looked at Griffin. He looked like he was going to be sick, but he also looked intrigued. They are gathering every single one of my problems into one. Beautifully decorated, $500 a plate ballroom, I said. I could see it. Julian on stage, the charismatic founder, Marcus, the solid partner, Sloane, the elegant CFO, watching her stolen money, and in the crowd, the secret mistress, Laura, watching her new life begin. I smiled, a real, genuine smile. This isn't a gala, I said. It's a trap. Griffin sighed, rubbing his temples. What, exactly, are you planning to do, Eliza? I'm an auditor, I said, pulling my chair back up to the table. And I am going to give them a presentation they will never forget. Ava, I need you to get me inside the audio-visual system for that ballroom. The night of the gala was a parody of Scottsdale glamour. The Montelucia resort was lit in soft amber, the scent of night-blooming jasmine mixing with the chlorine from the opulent pools. I stepped out of the Uber alone. I had spent the last week in carefully curated silence, letting Julian's and Griffin's lawyers exchange frantic, pointless emails. I had told Julian I was too emotionally fragile to sign, but that I would come to his gala. I wanted to see him succeed. I'd lied. One last time. For the sake of the life we'd built. He'd been so grateful, so patronizing. I was not wearing the beige of a mourning wife. I was wearing red. a column of crimson silk that was cut deep and clung to my body. It was not a dress of grief. It was a dress of retribution. I saw him immediately, holding court in the grand foyer. He was magnificent in a custom tuxedo, the charismatic entrepreneur, accepting handshakes and laughing, a picture of legitimate success. He spotted me. I saw the brief flash of alarm in his eyes. The dress was not in my script, but then he saw my face. I had kept my makeup subdued, my expression fragile. I gave him a small, broken smile. He visibly relaxed. He even gave me a small, private nod, as if we were in this together. He thought I was here to be his beautiful, tragic ornament. He thought this was my final supportive act before I took my $2 million and vanished, signing his NDA and sealing his freedom. Nearby, Marcus and Sloane were working the room, the ultimate power couple. He was loud, expansive, his hand gripping the shoulders of investors. Sloane was in a shimmering, beaded silver dress, her smile brittle but fixed, playing the part of the brilliant CFO. They were so busy selling their respectability, greeting the wealthy clients who would be their next victims. I moved through the crowd, my heart beating a slow, cold rhythm. Ava was already in place. She had spent the last 3 days as a temp hire for the catering company, a ghost in a black and white uniform, utterly invisible. I saw her by the service station, a tray of champagne flutes balanced on one hand. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. The trap was set. My first target was Sloane. I intercepted her near the silent auction tables, grabbing 2 glasses of champagne. "Sloane," I said, my voice soft. She jumped, startled. She looked at me, then at my dress. Her eyes filled with a complicated mix of guilt and suspicion. "Eliza, you came," Julian insisted, I said, offering her a glass. A beautiful event. As she reached for it, I timed my move to a passing waiter. I stumbled, my arm lurching forward. The entire glass of champagne, a cold, sticky deluge, arced perfectly down the front of her expensive silver dress. "Oh, my God!" I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. "Sloane, I am so sorry. I am so clumsy." "Damn it," she hissed, looking down at the massive, dark stain. "It's ruined." "Here, let me," I said, grabbing napkins, dabbing uselessly at the beaded fabric. "Ma'am, let me help." Ava materialized at Sloane's elbow, all professional concern. Sloane had placed her small designer clutch on the table beside her to deal with the spill. "Let me get you some club soda from the back," Ava said, already taking charge. In the chaos, as I held Sloane's attention with my frantic apologies, Ava picked up the clutch. "I'll take this for you, so it doesn't get wet." Sloane, distracted and furious, just nodded. Fine, just hurry." Ava disappeared behind a service curtain. 3 seconds later, she reemerged. She had a cloth and a glass of soda. She handed them to Sloane. "Your purse, ma'am," she said, placing an identical clutch, which I had purchased in cash 2 days ago, back on the table. I put it somewhere safe for a moment. "Thank you," Sloane snapped, grabbing the bag and the soda, and marched toward the ladies' room. She never looked twice. The bag now on her person contained a studio-quality, broadcast-range microphone, and it was live. One down. I turned toward the bar. Ava had supplied a photo. I knew who I was looking for. She was exactly as described in her late 20s, in a black dress that was slightly too daring for a charity function. She was sipping a vodka soda, her eyes fixed on Julian with a predatory, possessive hunger. Laura Donovan. I moved to stand beside her, ordering a simple water. She didn't even glance at me. "He's very charismatic, isn't he?" I said casually. Laura turned, annoyed at the interruption. "I'm sorry." "Julian," I said, turning to her with my warmest, friendliest smile. "He's my husband." I extended my hand. "I'm Eliza. You must be Laura." I watched the color drain from her face. She looked like she'd been struck by lightning. She was supposed to be a secret. She was here to stake her claim, not to be confronted by the wife. She stammered. "Oh, don't worry," I said, leaning in conspiratorially, my voice dropping. "Julian has told me so much about you. He was so excited you were coming. He said you were the future." I smiled again. "He really does have impeccable taste." Her hand was shaking so badly she had to put her drink down. I had just confirmed her deepest fear. She wasn't the secret partner. She was just another part of the game. I had pulled the rug out from under her. "Enjoy the gala," I said, giving her a gentle pat on the arm. "It's going to be a night to remember." I walked away, leaving her pale and trembling at the bar. I found my assigned table at the back of the room, near the AV booth. I could see Ava inside, a headset on, looking like just another technician. She had already confirmed it she was in. She had Julian's slick, empty presentation, and she had mine, disguised with the same file name. The lights began to dim. The master of ceremonies was walking on stage. Julian, Marcus, and Sloane now returned. Her dress still visibly damp were moving toward the front row. Julian caught my eye. He gave me that smile, the one that said, "Thank you for being so understanding. Thank you for being such an easy victim." He thought he had won. He was about to begin the main presentation. He had no idea he was already in my trap. The ballroom was hushed. Julian and Marcus walked onto the stage to a wave of enthusiastic, ignorant applause. They looked like the kings of Scottsdale, the embodiment of new money success. Julian stepped up to the podium, his smile so bright it was almost white, the light catching his perfect teeth. He tapped the microphone, a sound that echoed in the quiet. He looked out at the crowd, his eyes scanning, and I knew he was looking for me. He found me in the back, in my red dress. He gave me a tiny, indulgent nod, the last gasp of his condescension. "Thank you, he began, his voice rich and confident. "The future of design, the future of luxury, is not just about what we build, it's about the story we tell." He clicked the remote in his hand, and the show began. The massive 20-foot-tall screen behind him did not show a beautiful photo of a Riftwood-designed room. It flickered. It flashed a bar of static. And then it changed. The screen was filled with a bank statement, a stark, black-and-white copy. The logo for the Bank of Zurich was clear at the top. The account name was Riftwood Artisans. The balance, at the bottom, had 8 figures. A confused murmur rippled through the ballroom. Julian stared, confused. He clicked the remote again. The slide changed. Ava's work was brilliant. It was a diagram, a spider's web of deceit. Riftwood Artisans was in the center, and from it, dozens of arrows pointed to a constellation of other companies. Delaware Holdings LLC, Panama Imports, Marshall Islands Ventures. It was a map of their entire money laundering operation. The investors in the front row, the new victims, were staring at it, their faces like stone. "What is this?" Julian hissed, looking at Marcus, who just looked baffled. Julian clicked the remote again, frantically. The slide changed. A new account. This one from the Cayman Islands. A different set of transfers. A different, very large balance. I saw Sloane, in the front row, go rigid. She recognized this, the anomaly she had been fighting with Julian about. She knew this account was not hers. Julian was hammering the button, his face turning pale. "We're having a technical difficulty," he stammered. "Just one more slide." "Julian," I whispered to myself. As if she'd heard me, Ava clicked it. The final slide. It was not a number. It was a person. A high-resolution, smiling photograph of a beautiful, dark-haired woman. Beneath it, in large, clear type, were 2 words, "Account holder Laura Donovan." Time stopped. I watched Marcus. He stared at the screen. He looked at his sister's face. He looked at the Cayman account. He turned, his face a mask of white, murderous rage, and looked at his partner. "My sister," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You, with my sister." Julian looked like he'd been shot. In the front row, Sloane saw the same slide. She saw Lara's face. She understood, in one blinding, sickening instant, the depth of the betrayal. It wasn't just Marcus. It wasn't just the company. Julian had played her. He had used her to steal money, and he was giving it to her own sister-in-law. She was on her feet, the polite facade shattered, her face a gargoyle of rage. "You son of a bitch!" And her voice did not just carry through the front row. It exploded from the speaker system. Ava had her hot. "You dared to steal from us!" Sloane's shriek echoed, deafening the room. "You stole our money. You stole all that laundered cash for her for that little—" From the back of the room, near the bar, Lara, who had just seen her face 20 feet high, screamed back, "He lied to you. He was leaving you all. He was leaving his wife, and he was leaving you, you stupid cow. He promised me." The ballroom erupted. The three of them, Marcus, Sloane, and Lara, were all screaming at each other, a public, spectacular implosion of their entire criminal world, and Sloane, in her fury, was confessing everything. "I moved those millions, I cleaned those books for us." It was at that precise, perfect moment that the main doors of the ballroom burst open. 2 men and a woman in dark, impeccable suits entered. They moved with the quiet, unassailable authority of the federal government. Griffin had timed the tip-off perfectly. The lead agent walked to the front, ignoring the screaming. He projected his voice over the chaos. "Julian Price, Marcus Donovan Sloane, Donovan." They all froze. "You are under arrest by the Internal Revenue Service, Criminal Investigation Division, for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and money laundering." I stayed in the back of the room, by my table. I watched the agents cuff a gray-faced, utterly broken Julian. His eyes found mine across the room, wide with a final, horrified understanding. He finally saw me. Not the wife, the auditor. His smile was gone. It was gone forever. I took a final sip of my champagne. It was warm. I set the glass down. I turned, my red dress the only bright color in the room, and I walked out the door. I left them to the wreckage. I left them to the justice they had earned. I walked out into the cool, clean desert air, and I went toward my new life. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below. Let's connect and share our thoughts. Please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories and like this video. And if you want to support us more, hit that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.